Tune in to CVM. See it happen.
Jamaica, make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out. Don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6:30.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness has vowed to crack down on fake news, saying his administration will use all the tools at its disposal to punish those who defame public officials on social media and online. But how far can the administration go? How do they punish those who infract the rules while at the same time respecting the rights and freedoms that Jamaicans are guaranteed in the Constitution and in subsequent pieces of legislation? That's the issue this day on the lead story here on CVM TV. Let's start the show. Welcome to Lead Story on this Monday, June 24, 2024. My name is George Davis. Now, the Prime Minister, speaking to a group of young people in St. Anne on Saturday, said that his administration will crack down on fake news, referencing recent incidents where young people have been behind pieces of information published on social media that have been potentially defamatory to members of his administration. He referenced one case, didn't mention the name, but we all knew who he was talking about. It was an incident involving the Minister of Transport, Daryl Vaz, and the fact that the person, the young man who made the offensive post, was tracked down, and he issued a groveling apology on social media, saving himself from a lawsuit. And he says that, look, his administration is tired of incidents like these. He said that they have had a relaxed approach to these things over time, but he says the relaxed approach can't work any longer. They have to get tough. They have to counter misinformation, disinformation, and rank defamation being spread online. Immediately, the opposition PNP, just before I came to air today, issued a statement saying that it wants the Prime Minister and the administration to tread carefully, because the PNP says, look, it's a champion of free speech and freedom of expression, and it is condemning already what the government is proposing to do under Holness's pronounced crackdown. So already battle lines have been drawn over this very important issue. To talk about what the government intends to do and the remit that it has to do so, I've invited the Minister of Information, Senator Dr. Dana Morris Dixon, and noted attorney and data protection expert Chuck Cameron for perspectives on the issue. It's proper to say good evening to my guest in studio first. Chuck Cameron, welcome to Lead Story, sir.
Sir George, thanks for having me.
Excellent. And Minister, welcome to Lead Story this afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Happy Monday to both of you.
Thank you. Same to you. Minister, let's start with you. What does the Prime Minister mean when he says that his administration is going to crack down, is going to get serious on those who spread fake news online and use the social media platforms to defame public officials?
All right. Thank you for having me, and thank you for that question, because it's good to be able to clarify. I see some sensationalism taking place in relation to what the Prime Minister said, and we've had conversations around it on the role of social media and what we are going to do. And I think we have to start with the fact that Jamaica is a democracy, and Jamaica is a democracy that values freedom of expression and speech, and that is not going to change. This administration will not change that. And so what is being discussed is really issues around disinformation and misinformation that we see in the public domain. And it's not just a Jamaica situation. It's all around the world. Governments are having to grapple with this issue because there are some actors, sometimes it's even non-state actors or actors from another country that are doing this, and they can destabilize democracy. And the reality is that on social media, which we all have access to, there you have many people who will go onto social media, will post whatever they want without 1 ounce of truth. And it is important that we teach our population how to discern, how to know what is true, and also for us to start the conversation in a democracy, in a country that values democracy. How do we treat with misinformation, which could take down many governments? If we look at some of the studies, the World Economic Forum was very clear in one of their reports. It was the Global Risk Report for 2024. They said that misinformation and disinformation is probably the biggest short-term risk to human society and to democracy. It's a conversation we have to have. Where are we going to go? And I think that's where the Prime Minister was going, which is saying that when we go online, and we see it all the time, there are people who are posting things that don't have 1 ounce of truth, and there are many people who will believe what is said when there is nothing like that. It can lead to serious dangers to persons, to their livelihood. And I gave one example earlier today in terms of even threats that are online on social media. One of your colleagues in the media did a story, and there were some people who didn't like it. And on social media, they were threatened. Their life was threatened. And with AI, we see the misinformation and disinformation apparatus even stronger, and the ability to have fake news developed is even greater. And it's a conversation we have to have, and PM wants to start conversation.
So here's the thing, Minister. I hear that, and I allowed you to set that down because it's important for parameters to be set. But I'm interested, especially because the opposition fired off a quick press release to already accuse you of trampling on the freedom of expression and freedom of speech, and accusing you of being a government that is anti-free speech. Just how is the Prime Minister proposing to impose the crackdown that he spoke of? That is the key issue for me. How?
Sure. And then let's talk about it, because it's not as if there aren't certain remedies that are available in Jamaica. If someone feels that someone has put something on social media that is not true, we've seen the back and forth defamation lawsuits that are available. And sometimes there have been individuals who've not gone the route of the court. And you can use the court in terms of getting some remedy. And I think where the Prime Minister was going was that in many instances, you've had individuals that have posted things that are very untrue. There's no ounce of truth to it. And usually you would say, okay, I'm just going to ignore that. I'm not going to put any air behind it. But it can have a destabilizing effect, because people do start to believe that. And so what he's saying is that in terms of taking remedies through the court, that will be pursued more. That is not any crackdown on freedom of speech. Anyone can say anything. This is a government that believes in free speech. I mean, when you go on social media in Jamaica, it is very clear that we live in a free speech environment. But what is important is that we also tell the truth, and that we don't defame people, we don't threaten people, we don't bully people online, and that we actually have a safe environment on social media.
So, Minister, what I hear you saying is that what it boils down to is that the Prime Minister and his administration, whereas things were allowed to slide in the past, he's no longer letting things slide.
Correct.
Hear you on that. Chuck Cameron, what are the dangers in posturing to go after and going after people who use social media irresponsibly in this way?
Sir George, I think I'd love to reframe the question.
Yes.
What are the dangers of a responsible government not to do so? One of the primary responsibilities for any administration is to protect our democracy. So in the same manner in which we would have passed broadcasting laws as it relates to elections and electoral process, and that is where the administration of the day said, look, with this ability to influence voters, there must be rules around what is broadcast to ensure that people get correct knowledge and they could make an informed decision and not have outside actors impact on decisions that could, borrowing the language of the minister, destabilize not our government but our democratic processes.
Yes.
So in the same manner in which we have sought to manage that public broadcast. Now broadcasting is now democratized.
Yes.
You are a broadcaster. Well, yes, you're a broadcaster,
Yes.
but everybody's a broadcaster.
Yes.
So how do we now manage what persons broadcast while with a view to protecting our democratic processes? Because we also, in addition to the freedom of information, we also have a right to receive
Yes.
information. And when we say receive information, implicit in that is that it must not be misinformation.
But here's the thing. In the same way that it is important for the health of the democracy, for government to act in a manner to preserve the sanctity of truth, let's put it that way. Isn't it also important for the democracy for government not to be seen to be walking around waving the possibility of court action against people, lest it puts a chilling effect on debate and discourse? It's a real thing, I'm telling you.
To use lawful processes,
Yes.
to threaten someone with a lawsuit,
Yes.
that's part of an active democracy. That is suggesting that
Yes.
we have an executive branch and a
Yes.
judicial
Yes.
branch. So if that causes a chilling effect,
Yes.
you shouldn't be in the frying pan.
But here's the thing. The minister just said not just defamatory material, but she said instances of bullying and everything else. And this is where lines become blurred and you're not quite sure what is what, because someone will say, so hold on. I will no longer engage in robust criticism of the administration, robust criticism of the prime minister, lest it be determined that I used defamatory language or my language was of a kind that warrants court action against me. So therefore, I stay away from this debate. That chilling effect on the democracy is almost as unhealthy as the heavy doses of defamation and wild accusations that we see on social media daily, Chuck Cameron.
What I would like to see is a responsible, robust criticism, responsible challenges, grounded in fact, grounded in some public interest good. So if it has a chilling effect, because you may get sued if you say something that is untrue, that's the purpose of defamatory, that's the purpose of a defamation law. That's the purpose of having a Data Protection Act, because it is not acceptable to maintain a healthy democracy if you are going to be faced to answer misinformation and things that are not true. That's not a responsible, robust, credible argument.
Yeah, but you see, the people out there in the social media spaces will say, all we're doing is holding the government to account, and a government that doesn't want to be held to account hides behind legislation, puts it up and say, oh, you can't say this, you can't speak in this way, or we will sue you. It is a fact that is, and I maintain the point that if we're talking about health of democracy, these are the things that our political actors have to balance, because you don't want to appear to be putting a constraint on healthy debate.
Sir George, I would suggest that when we start to introduce Section 15, when we're looking at the anti-crime legislation, I use that phrase. I wouldn't say introduce that phrase,
yes,
but I use that phrase, a chilling effect on freedom of expression and free speech. And so my track record has demonstrated that I'm a staunch advocate for charter rights and fundamental rights. But the only way it must be a conversation. There will be challenges because there is no black or white. At times, the government will go too far. At times, other players will go too far. But that's why we have our judicial system. That's why we have our separation of powers. It has to be a healthy conversation, and some of that conversation will spill over into the courts. And it ought not be a chilling effect if it is you may be sued. Once you're in a public space and you're representing constitutional rights, human rights,
yes,
yeah, there is a responsibility and exposure.
Yeah, this is a hot one, because already the debate is raging on social media, consequent upon what Andrew Michael Holness said to supporters in St. Anne on the weekend. We'll continue this discussion on Lead Story right after this.
We step out of the barber shop. We're outside right now. We're at Ruby's waterfront.
You see, my story, that's God. God put people in my life and make them give me vision and help me.
The dream weekends, the this, the that. Are you first set the pattern there in the 80s?
As a promoter, yes.
I start make some clothes when I look for what me and Marlon used to wear then. I don't wonder how wear they ugly fast.
Taboo became an instant hit then.
We could call it a gentleman's club.
A
now.
gentleman's club.
Yeah.
To have all the executives come in.
I call the name Ruby. You're going to mash up some house.
The Cut is brought to you by Flo and Guinness.
The time by Grace. Taste that moves you is
6:45.
Brazil, a powerhouse of South American football. Costa Rica, a team known for their resilience and passion, will play the beautiful game. Who will win? See it happen tonight live at 8 p.m. on CVM TV. Brought to you by
KFC, J-Ray and Nephew, Quartz, Sunshine Snacks.
Welcome back. The Prime Minister says his administration will no longer be passive as people spread misinformation online, spread disinformation in social media spaces, and defame public officials. He says the crackdown starts now. Joining me to discuss further what the implications of the Prime Minister's words, the Minister of Information, Senator Dr. Dana Morris-Dixon, and an attorney at law who is a data protection expert, Chuck Cameron. Minister, people will say, well, look, this is not a situation like the United States where it has been proven that operatives from Russia or China are trying to destabilize the government. In other words, to influence governmental change by spreading false information about the activities of government. This is not a situation like in the UK, where operatives and actors from those two same countries are involved in the very same thing. What Mr. Holness has pronounced is an overreaction to robust criticism of himself and his government. He doesn't like the in-your-face criticism of people, a growing number of Jamaicans, and that is why he's taking this move to impose conditions on Jamaicans that make it seem as if we are living in a real banana republic. I put that to you as Information Minister for your response.
Yeah, I'm surprised you said that. but the reality
that's what's being said. That's what's being said.
No, that could be, and that could be the thought, especially given how it has been framed in certain circles. And the important thing for us to understand is that the government truly believes in robust debate, robust dissent, robust opposition, but it must be grounded in truth. No one has an issue with someone saying, you know, the government didn't do this properly, or could have done that better, or didn't look at this in enough detail. That is what a healthy democracy does. A healthy democracy has a healthy opposition, whether it's from an established opposition or from a regular citizen who just is watching what is happening in their country. And that is what we stand for. This is standing for truth. And so anyone, I have no issue when someone goes on social media and says, you know, the government should do this better or isn't doing a good enough job on that. That is fair, and we have to respond. And I will respond, or a minister will respond to that. That is legitimate criticism. And we want to encourage that because that's how we get better as a government. But the problem is where you have persons who just put out information where there is not one ounce of truth to it. I've had to respond to things in relation to, for example, NIDS, where I've had people who put out on social media and things go viral on WhatsApp, things about the government going to arrest people who do not have NIDS. There is not one ounce of truth in that. There is no legislation that says that. That is dangerous. I have had people who have come to me and said to me, how can the government do that to people when there is no such legislation? It is dangerous. And so what we're saying is we have to have a conversation about how we use social media, how we have the robust debate, because I love the robust debate in social media. But how do we have it based on facts and on truth?
Yeah,
the reality is that there are many people. You see all of the different social media platforms. I want them to be listening to you, George, and for you to be giving them the information. You give them facts. You often give them both sides to a particular issue. That's what we want. But on social media, you know, there are many individuals who just wake up one morning and post something that has no ounce of truth to it, and people believe it because it has reach.
You know,
that
Minister,
is a conversation we have to have.
You know, one of the things is, and Chuck Cameron here knows this very well, yourself, you know it very well, I'm sure, precedent. And here's the thing, here's where I'm going. The administration cut a rod for its own back, and it effectively broke its own tamarind switch some time ago at the height of COVID, when that young man, who we all remember, went and said some things about the Prime Minister at the start of lockdown, was corralled by the police inside his own home, marched down to a police station and made to apologize, and the video posted on social media, it went viral. There are many people who still believe, I know better, I don't believe because I know what happened, but many people who still believe that it was the Prime Minister acting on behalf of his administration who ordered the police to track him down to force him to apologize for the statements he made. That is why you are having the difficulty you are now, Minister, with the noise around the Prime Minister's crackdown, because they say, here is Holness cracking down, threatening to crack down in the way he did against that young man at the start of COVID.
And I would say that's not the case at all. The administration has been very clear, and I'll be very clear, that what we are looking at is really the false information that's out there, the fake news that's out there. And I'll tell you some of what we're doing, and I think that should help to appease some individuals in terms of what we're doing in the ministry in particular in relation to this matter. And we believe that the crux of it is really about information and educating our people. A lot of times we're on social media and we take what's said there as gospel and we'll share it with our friends, and it's important that we teach how you discern what is true. And that is what, for example, has been done in Canada. That's one example, where they have a public education campaign that is geared towards having people question the information that they come upon and to know where they can go and fact check. And so what we're doing, and I know the Broadcasting Commission, even before I took over this portfolio, had started work down that road to develop a campaign where we teach or people how to discern, how to know what is real, what's not real. Even JIS now has a fact-checking website where you can go and fact-check, just check to see if something you heard or saw is correct. So we believe the first course of action is information and education. So that's first. And then we also have things like the Cyber Crimes Act that can support individuals. And this is not just about government, because the reality is there are a lot of people who've been bullied or threatened online who are not government officials. These are ordinary people who have gone through this, and it has caused psychological turmoil for these individuals. And it is important that we also protect those people. And so what we're saying is that we have to do that campaign where we teach people how to discern. And we also have to speak about how to use social media. We have to talk about the Cyber Crimes Act and how persons can use that in order to protect themselves.
Yes.
Because you would have known of the case before where there was revenge porn,
yes,
and there was a prosecution and a successful conviction there.
Yes.
And so there are remedies that we already have.
Yes.
And what we want to do is to
Yes.
use those more and look at where else we could go.
Hear you on that. Chuck, I want to ask you two things in the time we have left. The first is this. So many Jamaicans feel as if they have the freedom to say anything on social media because of this thing that I'm saying as a journalist, that they don't understand freedom of speech and freedom of expression. It's a crash course I'm asking you to give. Does freedom of speech / freedom of expression allow you to say anything you want to say about anybody because you have a social media account and it's your mouth?
No, that's a crash course. You can say anything, but as like with any other right, there are always restrictions or constraints upon which you can exercise that right, subject to the extent that it impacts on another individual right that they enjoy or some other public interest. So in short, if it contravenes or impacts negatively on another individual or someone else's right. That's the constraint, and very often it is a grey line, and a court has to decide. What I have not heard, and I'm particularly interested in our Data Protection Act, because very often, especially in this AI age, we have persons using the likeness of individuals, their facial features or their voice to do these deep fakes. That is where that individual's right and autonomy over his personal data is being used in an unauthorized fashion. There are also criminal sanctions available for persons who do so. So even outside of the political discourse, we are talking about protecting the individual and not having someone use my voice, use my likeness in an unauthorized fashion. I recently became aware of a skit that was very impressive, a political skit, I must say, where a politician had said some things. It was recorded on a phone, and then another politician on the other side acted as if she was speaking.
Well, you can't see it, I can see it. It was Ian Hale's voice with Juliet Cuthbert Flynn,
It was an excellent skit. I think it was well put together. However, in those circumstances where her voice was being used in an unauthorized manner, persons can be exposed to criminal sanction.
And incorrectly, because she wasn't speaking to him. This was years ago.
That's the point. That's the point. So it is more about protecting, one, the individual, and protecting our right to receive and share information. And this is one of the existential threats that we face in the digital age. It will be rocky, and there will be a lot more discussions, and I hope it reaches the court.
My producer will kill me if I don't ask you this. Defaming someone in a WhatsApp group. So I have 30 friends, all professionals, and I say Chuck Cameron is so and so, so and so, so and so. Someone takes a screenshot, sends it out of the realms of the privacy of my WhatsApp group, and I'm hit with a lawsuit.
If it is you didn't press send and you only gave it to your assistant and she saw it, that is a defamatory act, because when you're looking at the letter of the law as it relates to defamation, if it's published to one person and that one person has reason to lose the respect that she once had for me or for you, that is what defamation is. So there's no security in a group. Once it's shared with one person, that's where defamation arises.
So if I WhatsApp you directly, is it still a problem?
Well, if you and I are having a discussion, that's okay. But if you defame someone else and you share that with me and that individual can prove it, yes, you are exposed.
Senator Morris Dixon, there's a prominent case that is before the courts now involving one of your colleagues and another one of your colleagues in the lower house. I won't ask you for details, but in terms of communication in WhatsApp groups that the government finds defamatory of public officials, is this administration cracking down on those things as well?